because yeah, there has to be buy-in for the "how are you really" conversation. So, how you doing? I'm doing
Yeah.
great. How about
Yeah.
you? Oh, I'm doing great. Okay, now that that's out of the way,
Yeah. And
how you
now how
doing
are we
really?
really doing?
Now, how are you doing really? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like get the handshake. I love that. Get the handshake out. Get the handshake done,
Yeah.
and then let's lie to each other, and now we can tell the truth.
That's right. All right, welcome back to Raising Men. Today's episode is a really special one to me because I get to sit down with somebody whose work has been shaping the conversation about masculinity and manhood for years. A guy by the name of Ken Mossman. Ken is a leadership coach and a facilitator who founded Cirrus Leadership and developed the Integrated Adult Man program, which invites men to dismantle outdated teachings about manhood. Ken, I got to tell you, I'm thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me. Where do we find you today?
Thanks, Sean. We find me on the second floor of my home in upstate New York, right outside of Saratoga Springs, Wilton.
I love it. That's beautiful. Well, let's just dive right in. You know, one of the things that you've talked a lot about is the lone wolf or the lone cowboy, this myth of a man who does it all on his own. Why do you think that myth is so persistent? And what's the problem with it?
Yeah, it's a great place to start, Sean. I think the myth is persistent because the culture has this attachment to this notion of not only notion of independence, but notion of quote unquote fierce independence. And and what are the cultural icons we turn to in terms of that kind of fierce independence? Well, it's this notion of the self-made man. Again, you mentioned the lone cowboy, lone wolf, lone cowboy. But if we really take a step back and look at those ideas, first of all, and I know we talked about this a little bit when you and I first spoke, and we'll use the lone cowboy as an example. So the lone cowboy, of course, had a horse. He's out on the range. He might be out there by himself, cattle, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
But he's got his horse. He's got his saddle. He's got his rifle. He's got all the tack that goes along with having a horse out. Now, unless
Bullets,
he was
gunpowder, yeah, food.
yeah, the whole thing. And unless he's singularly a leathersmith, a leather worker to make the saddle, unless he's a blacksmith to forge the horseshoes and the barrel of the rifle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Unless he made his own boots, went out there and tanned his own leather, all of that stuff. There were other people involved, certainly other creatures involved, but there were other people involved. And the same idea goes for the self-made man. Well, if the self-made man created a business, if he is relying on customers, if he's relying on any kind of help at all, yeah, there's a big difference between being an idea guy, wildly important, and but there's a big stretch between, I'm an idea guy, or there's an idea guy who had an amazing idea, an amazing idea. And there's lots of examples out there of course, businesses that grew out of amazing ideas. But if we really back up and look at, okay, were they really self-made, or did they take that idea and run and enlist other people? If they didn't enlist other people, then chances are, even if they consider themselves self-made, there isn't much that got made.
Yeah, we stand on the shoulders of giants, don't we?
Well, we can't stand on the shoulders of giants, but we also depend on I mentioned the business and the customers. We depend on the people who show up to buy the service or the good or whatever that we're creating. We rely on others. There's a whole network. There's a whole system at play there that flies in the face. The evidence flies in the face of the notion of the self-made man.
Yeah.
And that isn't to say that, well, just finish the thought. That isn't to say that one shouldn't pursue those ideas and those visions and those dreams. Absolutely. But just be clear that it's going to take more than just you in a bubble or out on the range somewhere.
Yeah, and that's where the problem is and in fact, if you don't actually figure out how to get around the myth, you probably won't accomplish much, will you? If the lone cowboy didn't have someone to make boots, he wouldn't have boots. And if
Right.
he didn't seek that person out, and if he didn't have the humility to understand that that's not something that he brings to the table, you need to figure out what you bring uniquely to the table and cultivate that as opposed to trying to do everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, trying to do everything leads. Well, for one thing, it eventually leads to just fritzing out, to burning out.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we need other people. We need to be in relationship with others if we're going to get anywhere.
Yeah. I, when it comes to parenthood, I suffered from this disease so seriously. My wife suffers from it too. And so we really struggled in that sense. And one of the things that was where it was a really acute struggle for me is when my son was born. He was our firstborn. I didn't connect with him right away, and my wife did. He'd been growing in her belly, and when he came out, it was they weren't meeting for the first time, right? They were seeing each other for the first time, and it's a different thing. They were already in love, and for me, that didn't happen, and I thought I was a sociopath, and I was going through that completely by myself. And I what is wrong with me? I do not love this crying, pooping, puking thing. And it came later from me. And there were a lot of men that I saw making a lot of noise about how much they loved their child and their baby. Right when he came out, I just, I saw him and I loved him more than anything in the world. And I knew I would give my life for this. That's the story. That's another myth, right? That is so pervasive. And that just wasn't true for me. So I felt like something was wrong. And what I found out is as soon as I started opening up to other fathers, that's the common thing. That's the vast majority of fathers feel the exact same way. They don't feel connected with their sons until much, much later on. And it shocked them too. And they went through it alone also. And it wasn't until I started sharing this thing that was shameful for me. I come to find out that everybody has it.
Well, there's a few things in there, Shaun. One of them is that you raised the flag of shame there, and oh boy, we could do a 6 months show.
I think we probably could.
So maybe let's maybe not go there, but I'm really curious, and that is what had you reach out and start sharing what you were going through with other men and other fathers in particular?
That's a fantastic question. And what it came down to for me was I had this realization about the lone wolf thing that you mentioned. The cowboy doesn't make his own boots. And I realized that I didn't have to go through this stuff alone. Around that same time, I had a friend, really, really close friend, been one of my best friends since 8th grade. He came to me and he told me he was getting a divorce after 20 years. And I was shocked, and I had the typical reaction, oh, what are we going to, we got to fix this thing. You can't get a divorce and all this stuff. And then he started telling me why. And he shared with me the way his life had been in the last decade and about all the struggles that he's been through. And I had two realizations at this time. This is one of my closest friends ever, and I didn't know this. For 10 years, he'd been struggling with this thing, and I had no idea. And I felt two things at one time. I felt mad at him that he never came to me. And I felt like a failure as a friend that I didn't elicit this from him. And then I also realized that I had my own struggles over the past 10 years, and I hadn't shared any of them with him either. And that shocked me out of my sense of complacency, out of this sense that I had to be the lone wolf who knew all the answers at once, and allowed me to realize that my world is so much bigger than it can be so much bigger than it is. If I just realize that I don't have to be the one who does everything. I don't have to come up with everything myself. I can leverage the wisdom and the works of others. And I can be of more service to other people in my life if I do that, instead of trying to do absolutely everything myself.
There is a treasure trove of good stuff to dig into in what you just shared, and the notion that somehow or other we're supposed to know.
Yeah.
That's very Hollywood. The happily ever after nonsense.
Yeah.
Storybook Hollywood. It's all in the same vein. But there is this notion, and this is another piece of what gets us in trouble as men, is the story about, being the authority, being the one who has the answers, being the let's go with authority and the answer guy, always having an answer. And which takes questions off the table, which takes curiosity off the table, which takes the idea of for many, not for all, of course, but for many, of being willing to say, I don't know. Hey, what about the humana humana? Hey, I have no experience with the humana humana. I don't know.
Yeah.
See, it goes to the joke of, why don't dudes ask for direction? Because they don't want to admit that they're lost.
That's right.
But in relationship, this notion that there's something shameful perhaps about being in some sort of struggle within a relationship. And I got to say, as I look across the board at my own relationship, of course, I'm including myself in this, but the folks I know who have, the best relationships out there, the best marriages, the best long-term relationships, friendships included, is there's been a history of friction, not ongoing friction, not irreparable friction. But if we really look at the relationship, there have been times where it was far less than ideal. And then that presents a challenge. Then, okay, how are we going to get through this? How are we going to get through this? So, friction does amazing things. Friction polishes stone. Friction polishes relationships. It's kind of like the way it works. And the notion that we don't, as men, that we don't talk about these things is, it's troublesome on a good day, deeply damaging on a not so good day. Where do we go? And there's tons of statistics out there on men and the epidemic of loneliness and deaths of despair, suicides, etc. I mean, there's tons of statistics out there. You don't have to go through.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, it is, and again, that's not to say that there aren't those problems with folks who aren't men. That there certainly are.
Yeah.
But at the same, but we're here to talk about men.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's wildly important to be able to, and statistics on men in friendship, a lot of men reporting that they actually don't have a good friend, a single friend that they can be, in conversation about the stuff that really matters. That is deeply problematic. And, it's interesting because part of which brings up this notion also that be anything in the world, but don't be vulnerable. Don't show your cards.
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, how does that math, how does that math even work? If I'm lonely and I'm feeling alone, but I'm told that to be vulnerable or showing my cards is a bad thing, but I actually want to connect about things that have any kind of depth or true meaning to them, then that is going to take some taking the armor off.
Yeah.
That is going to take some showing of the cards,
Yeah.
and that takes courage.
It takes a surprising amount of courage.
Takes a surprising.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, it's like other things. After the first time you do it, it's like, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. Really, it really was. No one's bleeding here.
Right.
I live to tell the tale. Oh, I could probably do this again.
Yeah.
So,
One of the things that and I'm so bad at it, which is why it's so heavy on my mind. But one of the things that really helps me with that is, it's like that story with my friend. I long for people to come to me and be vulnerable. I long for my friend to reach out to me and say, man, I'm really going through this thing. Can you help me? I desperately want that, but yet I don't want to do that.
right.
I don't want to go to my friend and burden him. And that's not a burden. You are doing me a favor by coming to me. You are solidifying our connection. You are making me feel valued. You are giving me the opportunity to give back to you for everything that you've done for me. And yet
Right.
I'm not willing to give that to my friend. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And we're all that way.
Yeah, it's that there's it's the distorted impact, if you will, of the notion that 'tis better to give than receive, and that's something I've talked about a lot in the work that I've done with men over the years as well, and it's fascinating because if 'tis better to give than receive. Now giving, if you do the math, the math equation doesn't quite work out, because if it's better to give than receive, and everybody's walking around, it's about better to give than receive. I can't accept your help,
Right.
but I'm always here for you if you need help.
Yeah.
The math just doesn't work out, because there's got to be someone to receive the giving that you're doing.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
And there is something also that I think it's really important to recognize. If you think about if you give someone a gift, a material gift, the expectation is not that they're going to take it and hand it back. They're not going to say, "Oh no, 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 no! I can't possibly receive this. I can't receive this from you on my birthday, because 'tis better to give than receive."
Right.
So take it back. Would you like some cake?
Right. Exactly.
Oh no, I couldn't possibly, because you can see it. I mean, it gets, and they're kind of goofy examples on the one hand. On the other hand, there is to me anyway, there is a generosity, if you will, a generosity of spirit, a generosity of I'm looking for the language for it, generosity of energy, generosity of spirit, perhaps. Let's use that. There's a generosity of spirit in graciously receiving, whether you're receiving a material gift or whether you're receiving, the helpful ear of a close friend.
Yeah.
And again, it's there's this feedback loop in relationship of giving, receiving, not scorekeeping, by the way.
Yeah.
Not scorekeeping. Oh, have they received as much as I given, or have I received as much as they've given? That's crazy making. But there is this. I think there is a deep generosity to receiving with grace.
I feel like a helpful metaphor there is like that of a flame, right? It's like you have a candle and sharing that warmth and that heat with another person, or even using your candle to light somebody else's candle. It doesn't take away from you. It actually, it adds to the value in the world. It adds to the warmth in the world. It adds, it it is additive. It is 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
And
No one complains about the guy who lit the campfire.
that's right. That's right. That's right. You mentioned loneliness and isolation, and there is an epidemic of that, especially among men, especially in particular among young men. And yet we live in a world that's flooded with coaching content and advice for men and Instagram and YouTube and influencers and all of this stuff. How do you reconcile that? We probably have more information available than ever in the history of humankind. And yet we have this loneliness and isolation epidemic. How do we square that circle?
Yeah, man. Oh, I wish I knew. What I can say about that is, the social media is not connection. Even
That's a really powerful statement, and that's not obvious. It's almost like saying potato chips aren't food. It's kind of the same thing. It's
well,
junk.
let's not insult the potato chip here.
No, I love a good potato chip. Don't get me wrong, but if that's all you're eating, you're dead.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And by the way, social media is kind of the same way. There's a healthy use of social media, right? And there's an unhealthy reliance on it. And so, yeah, I love that statement. Social media isn't connection.
yeah. Social media isn't connection. The other thing is, and we can't blame it all on social media, but there is a way that we have, bought into the notion that equates with connection. Like I'm getting my fix of connection via social media, or I'm even getting my fix of connection via text. Again, nothing wrong with those. Well, there's a lot wrong with social media, from an algorithm and what shows up in your feed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Social media, if we look at social media, it let's face it, it tends to be a performative space.
That's right. Yeah, it's me.
Yeah, there's a lot of me on there. There's a lot of, great vacation pictures and parties and things like that. If it's not stuff that's, deeply disturbing and dividing, there's more than enough of that on the one hand. On the other hand, again, connection, it's easy, and it's super easy to get lost in those spaces. And I think I mentioned to you when we first spoke, I've been on pretty much a social media free diet since I started my sabbatical back in January of 25. We're recording this on the beginning of October. But back to the question about I think back to the question about the loneliness piece. At some point, it's really important to first of all take a look at oneself, which is a hard ask.
Yeah.
Which is a hard ask, especially in a culture that so values that to tie it together, that values that myth of being self-made or being fiercely independent. Mm-hmm. It takes an awful lot of courage to look and say, wow, really, I am in fact a lonely guy. I don't have friends that I want to have. So even just admitting that, I think is a really important, admitting that to oneself, and also being willing to admit that, no, actually I want, and I see the fact that I need relationship of some sort. I need connections outside of myself. We're social creatures. Mm-hmm. We are social creatures. And I think the acceptance of that is wildly important, or at least opening the door. And we know how important. I mean, if we look at something as out there, if you will, as radicalization, the radicalization,
right?
Whether it's radical on either end of the political spectrum.
Yeah, however it goes. Yeah, whatever you're getting radical by.
Yeah, whatever way it goes. What do people find in those radicalized echo chamber spaces? They find connection.
Mm-hmm.
They find connection to ideas, and oftentimes they find connection to other people who share those ideas.
Yeah.
That's why do gangs form? Why do these things happen? They're places where people go in moments or seasons of desperation to find belonging.
Yeah. You know, what do we do as parents to make sure that our kids don't catch this disease? What should dads do about this? What should moms do about this? I'm just sort of struck. One of the things that we can do is obviously be a good role model, and that is one of the most difficult things here because we've grown up in a different soup, and we've grown up in a soup that fostered this myth, and we need to kill it.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to kill it with an example when you're not, it's just the air you've been breathing. But I'm sure there are other things we can do too, other than just try to model the appropriate behavior. What do you think about that?
Well, you talk about being the example, and that raises a really important question. What am I being the example of? Am I being an example of the authoritarian know-it-all, father knows best? Am I attempting to be the walking, talking example of that?
Right.
Or am I being the example of, hey, I think I might have some clues, but if I'm honest with you, I don't know Jack. Or am I being the example of, because I could also be an example of a completely clueless whatever.
Yeah.
Or I could be the example of one who moves about the world with, and I'm going to borrow from my own work here. This integrated human being who at least has a recollection of what it was like to be a child. If we're talking about raising kids, do you have a recollection about of what it was to be at that particularly developmental age? I have a story that I just absolutely love about one of my more brilliant fathering moments, based on a lot of it came to this after running into an awful lot of angry walls.
Yeah.
And I remember this as clear as day, as clear as it was yesterday. And my son was 4 years old. My son was 4 years old, and he was doing the thing that 4-year-olds do, which is, being kind of this crazy, wild man, developmentally appropriate, absolutely developmentally appropriate, running around like a nut.
Yeah.
And and I remember standing in my kitchen, and he was running around like a nut, and I said, Kai, because that's his name. I said, Kai. And I looked down at him, and I just thought, I'm going to try something different this time, because everything else I've done doesn't work. And I just looked at him and I said, Kai, you're acting like a 4-year-old. He was 4 years old. And he looked at me, and his eyes just got big, big blue eyes got big as saucers. And he's just like, Daddy, I am a 4-year-old.
Right.
And I was like, that you are. Carry on. Because, and this is kind of the important piece, because what was happening over here that had me lose my patience with a kid doing absolutely developmentally appropriate things, I was unconsciously slipping into spoiled brat. The world rotates around me.
That's right.
I was devolving into my own distorted version of a 44-year-old at the time, 44-year-old 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And and just that simple goofy act, just for me anyway, it's just like opened up the floodgates. Oh, okay, my job as a parent is to be able to meet him, and if I can't yet do that, develop the capacity to meet him at his developmental level, not expect him to be operating as the 44-year-old or the 46-year-old, as the 48-year-old, whatever. He was going to be 4, he was going to be 6, he was going to be 8, and everything in between. And my job as a parent was to first meet him at that level.
Yeah.
Not devolve into it, but have access. And this, again, is part of the key, to have access to that part of me that was and may remain forever. I had to learn to access my inner child in a heartbeat. When he was older, I had to be able to access my inner confused, tween.
That's right.
12, 11,
Yeah.
13, that crazy period. And even more so as a teen in that experimental, indestructible phase, to be able to access those parts of myself, to first of all be in conversation with him without coming off as, again, the know-it-all authority on everything, because I don't know what it's like being him.
Yeah.
I knew what it was like being me, and also knew what it was like being me in a house where I couldn't seem to close the gap with my own folks.
Yeah. I remember so when my boy was younger, he's 6 now, but back when he was 4, it was so similar, and I would find myself flashing angry.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting situation for me. I am not by nature an angry person. I don't get particularly mad particularly quickly. I am measured, and I usually take a step back, and I don't have a lifetime of having experienced flashing angry and dealing with it. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that helped me with, so on the one hand, that was a drawback because I didn't have a lot of experience dealing with it. On the other hand, it also didn't feel normal to me. And so it shocked me into that's not right. And one of the things I realized is that I was drawing a line from his current behavior all the way until he was 25 years old or 30 years old, trying to make his way in the world, and realize he can't act this way when he's 30. Yeah, but he's not 30. He's 4.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's fine. And now, so there's a tension between him being able to be a kid and also having the skills to operate in the world. And one of the things, and I doubt you intended to do it this way, but one of the things you did when you said you're behaving like a 4-year-old is you made it clear that that's acceptable behavior for a 4-year-old, but not after he's 4. And even unconsciously.
I don't think he thought about it.
He didn't, but he still would have gotten that message. And I think that's such a powerful way to do that. Whether you meant to do it that way or not, I think it's tremendously powerful.
I think you're giving me way too much credit, Shaun. I think mostly the message, to be really honest, I think mostly the message was for me.
Yeah.
Really was for me to have the acceptance of him acting. Because of course he's going to act a whole lot differently when he's, particularly at that period of childhood, because the changes come so fast and furious. But yeah, I wish I could cop to being that wise.
I don't think anybody's ever that wise in the moment. I think that, but in retrospect, there's wisdom to that. One of the things that my boy does, which I'm trying to figure out how to deal with it, is he expects to be great at everything and has a very low tolerance of not being good at things.
Yeah.
And he was castigating himself on his way. I walk him to school most mornings, and he was castigating himself this morning on his way to school because he'd forgotten this notebook that he bought that has a combination on it, so he can put his journal in it.
Yeah.
And he was so angry that he'd forgotten it. And it's because he expects himself to be perfect. And I try not to model that, but I suspect I do model it. I suspect I model that exact same behavior in myself, and my wife probably does it too. And he's absorbing this stuff from us, and he's catching that disease, right?
Yeah.
And so I sat him down and I said, listen, nobody can remember everything. I can't remember everything. I said, you have a number of things. You have 8 things every day that you have to do before you go to school. How do you make sure that you remember all 8 of those things? He says, I have a checklist. I said, exactly. You have a mechanism that makes sure that you don't forget anything. If you didn't have that checklist, you'd forget things. And in fact, the reason we put the checklist into place is because you were forgetting things. And so that's a natural thing. It's expected. I forget things. Mom forgets things. You forget things. It's totally natural. But we need to put mechanisms into place to make sure. And at that point, he goes, maybe I need to add my notebook to that checklist. Great. Yeah, let's do that. And it'll be okay. We'll find the notebook. Don't worry about it, buddy. And he felt it still affected him a lot. As he was walking into school, I could tell that he was really upset with himself. But I don't know. I'm sure he'll get over it, and he'll have a great day, and it'll be fine. But it made me really reflect on going back to this lone wolf thing. It made me really reflect on what is he absorbing from the way that I'm behaving and the way that I just even unconsciously act out behaviors that maybe aren't healthy.
Well, there's a lot in there, Shaun. Again, there's a lot in what you're saying there, and perfectionism is a fascinating beast.
Yeah.
At times been there, done that. Bought that T-shirt.
Sure.
It fit impeccably well, of course. There is something also about being. First of all, it's. I think it's really important from a. This is my my part of my theory anyway.
Yeah.
Is that it's really important to kind of look at the whole system, at the environment, at what he's taken in, what any kid is taking in. Is it part of their is it nature, is it nurture, is it environmental? If a kid is in school and they're getting marked on things like that, does that is the message of the grading, for instance, is that, do they see that as a mandate in some way, shape, or form, or judgment of their being? I got an 80, on something, or I got a C, I got a what, I got an A, and I got an A. I'm all that in a bag of chips, or I got a B minus or a C or whatever, however they do it, and I got a bunch of red marks on my spelling test. Are they equating that with having spelled things the wrong way, or are they equating that with I'm an idiot?
Yes.
And obviously there's a long way between those two things, but I think it's really important to have questions about that, and to be curious about how they're taking that. Again, what is the education? What is our form of education promote?
Mm-hmm.
It is oftentimes about performance.
Yeah.
It is not necessarily about, this happens later. I think in later education, that's when we're, I think, at a developmental stage where we can see our education as learning to learn. But I think early on, in many cases, unless it's being taught in exceptional ways that I don't really know or understand, but unless they're being taught in exceptional ways that they are learning to learn, that they're involved in a process versus being prepped for a performance.
Yeah.
it's a whole different animal. And back to your point in terms of modeling, yeah, I think it's really important that our kids are able to see that we don't have it all together. The love part we got.
Yeah.
I know I will love you without condition for sure. You are welcome to make mistakes, and here, this is a great place to mess up. And we as adults do it all the time. We just we just do it at a slightly higher level.
That's right.
But yeah, I think it's important to recognize when, are they seeing the authority figures in their lives? Are they seeing them? How can you carry I'll put this another way because I can see I'm kind of drifting here, but I'll put it another way. I think it's wildly important as parents to hold one's authority as a parent, if you will, and loving guide as a parent, not authority over, but authority that comes from having, decades more of life experience. That carries authority with them.
That's right.
That carries authority. That carries some weight.
That's
on
right.
the one hand, but also carry one's cluelessness and one's fallibility, at the same level. Oh, silly me, And there's a big difference between, oh, silly me, and, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm such an idiot. Those are really, really different things. So, so I think it is important to look at, okay, when I mess up, how does my kid see me responding or react? Are they seeing me respond to things I get wrong? Or are they seeing me go into some sort of deep hole of reaction where I get triggered because I mess up?
Right.
It's like, how much permission do you have that gives them permission to fail forward, if you will?
Yeah, and I can imagine, your own harmful self-talk is another modeling thing. I mean, oh, I'm such an idiot. Why did I do that thing? I mean, that's basically teaching your kid to do that same thing. And that's not nobody should be calling your kid an idiot. Not even them.
Right.
Certainly not you. And if you're not willing to be nice to yourself and they're not willing to be nice to themselves, why would the rest of the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, permission to fail and fail with grace and and screw it up royally and then come back and do it all over again.
Yeah, and there's a real virtuous cycle to that because when you're appropriately modeling the right behavior and you're doing that work and you are in going back to the topic at hand, you're modeling reaching out and creating connections and asking for help and gathering all the resources that at your disposal and all of that. The kids inherit those healthier scripts and those healthier habits and those healthier patterns. And then they succeed more, which causes you to do more of that. Model more of that, and you're succeeding more, and which makes them succeed more, and it's this virtuous cycle. And the opposite is a vicious cycle. The opposite is more isolation and more struggle, and then which leads to more isolation and all of that, and you keep going down. And those are really the two options. You can either have the positive feedback loop, which is a good thing, or you can have the negative feedback loop, which is the bad thing.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you said it. They see it and they respond positively. Unless they don't.
Yeah, unless they don't.
Unless they don't. And I think that speaks to another piece, and that is, what are my expectations, and how realistic are my expectations, and are my expectations age appropriate?
Yeah.
Or developmentally appropriate? Do I give myself permission? Do I give myself permission to screw up publicly? In front of my family when I'm trying something new. Do my kids get to see me try new things? Do they get to see me try and fail? Do they see me get to, wander through the wilderness of mediocrity if I'm learning something new, to get to semi-competent, to get to meh, to get to, oh yeah, now I can kind of do this well and still screw up every now and then, to finally getting to the point where I'm doing something really well. Are they going to have a memory of that journey?
Yeah, and an impression of the journey, right? There's the specific memories of the things, and then there's the overall impression of what they experienced. Give me a sense of some actual some tactical things that men should do if they feel isolated, or how do we retrain ourselves to get away from this lone wolf myth? What should we do? I'm sitting here, I'm in my room, I'm all alone, I'm wallowing, I'm feeling disconnected. What are some tactical, real, like practical things that I can do to start the snowball going?
Yeah, there's a few things that come immediately to mind. One of them is if you've got friends that you haven't spoken to in a while, and you're feeling the urge, is to go ahead and reach out. Don't wait for them to reach out. Go ahead and reach out. Worst that's going to happen is nothing.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's one place to start. And maybe if you want to have a conversation about one of my friends and mentors, Rick Tamlin, used to have this thing. I think he still probably says it. How are you? Or how are you really?
Yeah.
To be able to have how you doing? I'm fine. How are you? Okay. Now, how are you really?
Yeah.
And a willingness to go there first. Well, here's how things are really going. And either it'll be picked up or it won't be picked up. And maybe there's a little bit of a conversation about, hey, you know what? I don't need you to fix me here. I'm not looking for advice, but here's how I'm doing really.
Yeah.
So the other guy doesn't feel like, oh my God,
I love this distinction between the how are you and the how are you really, because they actually, and a lot of the times when people talk about that, it's almost like, oh no, like the original how are you is a throwaway. It's not useful. But the how are you really, that's real connection. And that's true, but they actually both share, they both have a purpose.
Right.
And sometimes, like in our culture, and in our culture, we almost use how are you as a handshake, as a,
right.
We're very optimistic culture, and it's almost like we want to reinforce this collective illusion that everything is great. So when I see you on the sidewalk and I say, hey, Ken, how's it going? What I expect from you, the dance, your part of the handshake is to say, I'm doing great. How are you? And I say, I'm doing great too, whether or not it's true.
Yeah, right.
And that part of that is just like, life is good. And we're always striving for the best. And I discovered this one time. I was going through a particularly tough time in my life, and people were asking me, how are you doing? And I'm going, I'm all right. And I was answering that question in this kind of morose way where I was conveying, I'm not good at all, and I really could use some help. And I didn't get it from anybody. And in fact, what I got was kind of this, all right, okay, have a good day. Real arm's length thing. And it's because we weren't doing the handshake. We weren't dancing. We weren't, like, I was stepping on the other person's toes kind of in the dance.
Right.
And what I realized is what they needed from me was just to be, I'm doing fantastic. How are you? And in fact, that became my reflex. I just by default answer that question. I'm doing fantastic. And that has this drawback of oftentimes I'm not doing fantastic. And so if you're asking me the other question, if you're asking me the how are you really, I still have that reflex. And that's not healthy. The first thing is healthy. The second thing is not healthy. And so by making that distinction between the how are you and the how are you really, both on the giving end and on the receiving end, it turns it into a different dance. And it's a really, really, really powerful thing. And you can stay in the dance. You can stay in the, let's have this collective delusion that everything's wonderful. Or you can get into the other thing, which is actually about creating connection.
Right. And so you're absolutely right. I think there is something about meeting, because there has to be buy-in for the how are you really conversation. So how you doing? I'm doing great. How about you? Oh, I'm doing great. Okay, now that that's out of the way.
Yeah. And now how are we really doing?
Now how are you doing really? Yeah. So it's like get the handshake. I love that. Get the handshake get the handshake done.
Yeah.
And then let's lie to each other, and now we can tell the truth.
That's right. Yeah. I love that. That's a really powerful distinction.
It's fascinating. Yeah, here's our contract. We're gonna lie to each other, then we can get down to, and it's the other thing is, that's got to be with folks you consider trusted agents. Absolutely has to be with someone you consider a trusted agent.
Yeah.
And be willing to have that, those conversations. Again, it's a vulnerable thing to do. The other place I would point, and this is similar to a question I used to ask in my own podcast, where would you point a guy to start out? And I'm going to give an answer that I heard probably 90% of the time, which was find a men's group. Find a men's group. They are everywhere, whether they are church-based or they're associated with a big organization like Mankind Project, Every Man. They're all, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
They're everywhere, but you got to look for them.
Yeah.
They're everywhere, but you got to look for them. And understand that the first time you walk into a circle of men, it's going to be weird, unless it isn't. It's going to be weird unless it isn't, and take it easy on yourself. Go in and kind of feel it out and find one that works for you.
Yeah.
But be in conversation. It's an easy way to start being in conversation with not only other men one-on-one, but other communities of men who are serious about taking care of themselves and being in the deeper conversations, talking about the stuff that really matters. That's where I would point someone.
I think that's a really powerful suggestion and you've had two of them. You've had two really powerful suggestions, and the first one was, go ahead and reach out to someone you haven't reached out to in a while. And then the second one was find a men's group. And there are lots of ways to search for them. And, we used to have institutions in our culture that made these things happen naturally. We had churches, we had in-office work, we had sports leagues, which, that last thing still exists, maybe. But those institutions are dissolving, and they're not. For thousands of years, they've created that structure by which men could get mutual support, and now we have to find it ourselves. And the tools are out there to get it. We have the internet, we have social media. Those are good uses of those things. Mm-hmm. To find these sorts of groups and to interact with men. It used to be the case that you were dealing with something and you had to wait until your weekly meeting of the church group. But now you can just hop on Reddit and type it out into your supportive subreddit of men, and you'll get that kind of support and that kind of feedback if you're in the right space.
If you're in the right place, there's a lot of. I would approach some of the online men's groups with a little bit of caution again, because because I've seen some pretty.
I think
funky stuff.
I think the online portal to a physical men's group, is probably a good place to be, and an online men's group is maybe not as good of a place.
Yeah, unless it's curated and carefully curated.
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and
I'm with you there.
monitored. Yeah,
I'm with you there.
yeah. There's nothing beats in person, face to face. Or if we all didn't learn that lesson during the pandemic, then goodness, this is a good time to learn it.
It really is. And
Yeah.
I think the pandemic did two things. It taught us about the importance of that, but it also killed it off. A lot of the groups have just died as a result of the pandemic. And we're going to have to build it back.
Yeah, yeah, and they're out there.
Yeah. Yeah, they
They're out
really
there.
are.
There's a lot of them.
Well, I like to close these conversations up by asking for one principle. What is one principle that you would want to share that could be something that you aspire to in your own life, or it could be something that that it's just really been a solid principle that you live by. And I know I'm putting you on the spot because
No,
I didn't warn you that I was going to be asking you for this, but that's part of the magic of it. I'm interested to find out what bubbles up in this heated moment. What if there's one principle that you'd like to share, what would it be?
Yeah. Oh wow, just one.
And you know what? Feel free to share more than one if you like.
Well, no, the one that speaks to me I think the one that speaks to me the loudest is one that I've mentioned already, and that is allow yourself to develop or redevelop. I mean, we all had it as children. We all had it as children. I'm going to say the discipline to move through the world with wild curiosity.
I love that. That is so powerful. Have the discipline to move through the world with wild curiosity. That is a fantastic principle. Thank you for that, Ken.
Yeah. Thanks, Shaun. Thanks.
Well,
for
Ken,
asking.
it has been an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you. I hope to have you back in the future, and we can have many, many more conversations. Thanks again for taking the time, and let's keep in touch.
Yeah. Thanks, Shaun. It has been an absolute delight. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure.